Hello Dream Team, welcome along to Season 3, Episode 36 of The Good, The Bad and The Rugby. No Has today, Tins is alongside. I'd like to start with an assurance that we have dried out from last week's show. There is a lot to get stuck into this time around. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm not sure I have quite dried out as much as you have. It was my wife's birthday last week, so I took her away this weekend. And someone might have swapped the bathwater for rosé.
Right.
I feel
You're seeping.
I feel a little bit that way. But it was a beautiful weekend.
Yeah.
A little place called Lakes by You. I think Cordelia would love it if you want to take it there. Had a lot of fun. And not feeling very tired today.
Right. Tired but energised off the back of a quite extraordinary final. We are going to come on to that in the short term. We are actually also going to have Simon Massie-Taylor with us a little bit later on, Chief Exec of Premiership Rugby, to break down the current state of the game. It's a bit of an end-of-term report, I suppose. But first things first, the headline off the back of the European Champions Cup final was La Rochelle's extraordinary, stunning, pulsating victory to lift the trophy. The subtext, though, is what happened to Leinster. And on that note, it's a very warm welcome to our good friend, the former Ireland and Leinster winger.
You've really thrown him a tough one there, haven't you?
The provincial side's record try scorer with 69 tries. They could have done with one more of those at the weekend. Shane Horgan. We often sort of debrief on games alongside Hask and Tins, and I think they've got quite used to turmoil and Hask's former club's gone out of business, so he's not exactly riding the emotional roller coaster. First things first, did you watch on Saturday as an impartial observer, long gone from the current setup, or did you bleed blue and cry tears of a similar colour?
I'm not fully sure why I've come on this podcast, by the way. I'm not emotionally stable enough to do it after the weekend.
Wow.
I was absolutely devastated, and I can sometimes, I think, remove some of my connection to my former club, and I like to think I can be relatively dispassionate about analysing them. But it's been a long time since I've been that sick over a result, and I just sat after the game with my head in my hands. I was actually pulling my jumper over my head. I found it really difficult to accept. I was trying to think of when I had the feeling last, and it certainly hasn't been since I retired. And it was the last feeling I felt something similar. Was around World Cup 2007, but from a Leinster context, it was at the after the semi-final in 2006, where we had a brilliant quarter-final against Toulouse and played rockstar rugby in the south of France, and we went into that semi-final as favourites against Munster, and with a certain fly half called Ronan O'Gara playing for them. And they devastated us and bat us out the gate. And it wasn't just that, but it was almost like they had reinforced or confirmed all the traits about the worst traits about Leinster, and how the stereotypes of Leinster not showing up and being fancy Dans and not being there for it when it counted. And I thought we'd finished with all that.
The Flash Boys from Dublin.
And exactly. And O'Gara seems to have brought it back single-handedly by his coaching of La Rochelle. It was honestly the most deflated I've been for so long.
Why?
Because I feel this team deserved a win. Now, they didn't deserve it on the day, and they didn't deserve it last year either. But I do feel this, cohort, and Sexton is gone now. I know he wasn't playing at the weekend, but it's his team. These team, they may have reached the end of their journey, and the other thing that connects it to that loss against Munster. I remember myself and Dennis Hickey and Brian O'Driscoll, we were embarrassed by the result. Now, this Leinster shouldn't be embarrassed by the result, but I remember I didn't want to leave the house, and we went back to Dricko's and smashed a bottle of gin, just like not wanting to go out into public and have a pint. And I'm not drawing that analogy with this Leinster team, but the other thing that I felt that is relevant is we knew we couldn't do anything between that day and 12 months later, really, that could change things. So that's the issue with Leinster now. No matter how well they play, if they beat every team in the next year by 25 points, nobody is going to care less, because it's all about how will they perform in a final or maybe a semi-final and against La Rochelle. The rest doesn't matter. Leinster have to win a pot, or else it's a binary thing, or else they're unsuccessful.
I mean, this is remarkable, and I'm sort of, in some ways, I'm surprised because of the number of years we've spent working together and watching Leinster. I can remember the game down in Toulon, where I think they lost last gasp to. They lost to Toulon. I think it was in Marseille. It was, and I remember you being gutted that day, but nothing like this. Were you nervous going into the game, or were you extremely confident of a Leinster win?
I wasn't confident at all, and I think sometimes, our certainly Irish fans and analysts, we can get sort of wrapped up in things, and especially with Leinster. Leinster are so good; they've so many good players. They're most of the Irish team, and we can get a bit one-eyed, but. I was incredibly nervous before the game, and I was I said, I think Leinster will get over the line as a judgment of heart, but in my head, I had, massive reservations about Leinster doing it, because there was this kind of conversation going around, or commentary that was, Leinster were somehow unlucky to have lost against La Rochelle. They lost in the semi-final 2 years before, deservedly. They lost in the final last year, deservedly. And for my money, and I said it to anybody who would listen, that La Rochelle were the favourites for this game. And I think they were. And Leinster had a brilliant start, and they performed magnificently. But La Rochelle always stayed in there. And one of the things I raised before the game, I thought, right, the Leinster had put all their chips on the table to win the Heineken Cup. That was it. They put out very much a weakened team against Munster the week before, and it cost them, and they lost it. And I think once that happened, even more of the chips were on the table. There was nothing. There was no way back. They were burnt the bridges on the way across the river, and they went, we have to win this game. And the pressure that comes with that. On an individual game, and the fact that it's 4 years that I've been developing this team, and it was a final last year and a semi-final the year before, and it's O'Gara. All that pressure could do one of two things. It could inspire or inhibit. And actually what happened, it did both. It inspired the first half, and then they were racked by inhibitions and anxiety in the second half and did not play.
What happened? I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, it's extraordinary. 17-0 up after 12 minutes, scoring after whatever it was, 40 seconds through down sheet. Why the shift for a team with all that experience and collective nous and collective time together?
Massive credit to La Rochelle, because it was a phenomenal start, and it was a start where the coaches would have literally drawn up on the whiteboard, said, this is what we're doing, this is what we do off this line out, this is what we do off the next one, and they delivered it exactly what you would want. But then La Rochelle never let them get that extra score ahead, and they missed the two conversions of two of the three tries, and that try just before half time. That really sort of signaled something, I think, to both sides. You knew that O'Gara would go, they've given everything. Leinster were phenomenal in that first 20 minutes. The rooking, the height of the ruck was ridiculous. Accuracy and everything, they were brilliant.
It's 2.5 second average ruck time in the first 20 minutes.
Unbelievable. So highly skilled. But O'Gara was going in, they have given us everything. They have put their best 20 minutes of the season, our best half of the season, and we're only 9 points down. We're 2 scores behind. That was, and you could see the body language from the Leinster players was shrinking a little bit. And they were, I'm sure, thinking conversely, we've given our best ever half of rugby, maybe, of this or period of rugby, and we're only 9 points ahead. And they scored the last score. So it was crucial to get to make a really fast start and get ahead of them properly in the second half, and they never did it. And then they chipped it away. And then there was this anxiety crept in where you had Ross Byrne playing in the pocket for the entire second half. You had experienced players like Lowe and Gibson Park hacking the ball out of touch on the full. You had, the speed of the ruck really slowed down. They had no territory, no possession. And you also had La Rochelle, who were dominating them physically. And there was really a real inevitability about that, the try that put them 1 point ahead. But even with that, Leinster had a chance to win the game and should have. And it was surprisingly, Byrne was in the pocket for the whole of the second half until he needed to
do a drop goal. I was like, why are they not going nearer the post just to knock over a droppy?
I couldn't understand it. I was actually quoting your team in 2003 at the World Cup going, everybody on that pitch should have known what they needed to do in order to get a drop goal. I thought they would have brought Frawley on as well, so you've got two guys who could potentially do a drop goal, and that would be part of the policy. But one that didn't look as if anybody had considered it, and it didn't look as if the 10 wanted it. And that is sort of beggars belief. And I assume it's been practiced because, Stuart Lancaster, Leo Cullen, the team, they're guys who don't, leave a lot of T's uncrossed or I's undotted. So it must have been there. But James Ryan had gone off. So, who was making the decision to say this was a drop goal? It should have been clear. It should have come down from on high as well. And I suppose that was one of the big crucial moments. And the other big crucial moment for me was aside from, our inability to get out of our half at all in the second half, was around the line out, and they were throwing Will Skelton up at 2, which you could have thrown a Rizla under his boots for the height he was getting up on it.
He doesn't need to jump very high, to be fair.
No, he doesn't. But we have athletic guys who would, who can steal, and that changes the momentum. And how many times have we seen Paul O'Connell or Peter O'Mahony do that? Throw themselves up in front of the 2, steal the ball, and relieve all the pressure. And I know the policy is maybe stay in the ground and defend the maul, but they weren't having a great success at doing that. And I feel that was a missed opportunity.
What did you make of it as a rosé infused neutral?
Oh, I just, I felt there were some brave calls in La Rochelle. That there was one where they had the penalty right in front of the post. It would have taken them to within. Where they would have been 3 points would have gotten the draw at 26 all, or obviously a try wins you the game, and then they went for the corner, and then they got another penalty, then they went for the corner, then they got the try. Every sort of brave call went their way. They executed it. Whereas I just felt that on the same calls, yes, I agree completely. Leinster should have been thinking droppy, but then every brave call that they went to try and go for the corner again, and it didn't work, and then there'd be a turnover, or you see the yellow card against Dante, and you're like, they're going to win now, and then suddenly there's a red card. It all swings back again. It was just seesawing around in the best way as a neutral. And it just allowed me to go, wow, have Ireland shattered? Are they crumbled?
Don't go early on that. We're going to come back to that. That's the subplot. We're going to hold that one. The best European finals have always got an edge off the pitch as well as on it. And I think back to Johnny Sexton and your lot, and that sort of inspired by Liverpool. I think the hand of back, etc. There's always a sort of a friction around the occasion as well. Can I ask you a little bit about this supposed disrespect from James Ryan to Gregory Aldred, the coin toss? Did you hear anything about that on the day or see anything around that?
No, I didn't, but it's hilarious, and it's very Ronan O'Gara, So Ronan is a brilliant man at finding a slight. And by the way, I say that as a compliment, and it's sometimes necessary, and it drives players. Being disrespected. He's talking about felt that they were a small team. Was saying that the Leinster fans were giving them a bit of guff on the way in. All the stuff that's kind of nonsense and also normal. Well, it's not backslapping all the way in for the opposition team. So but he used that. Listen, O'Gara, and we'll come on to him later, hopefully, but O'Gara is just on a different level at the moment, I think, of coaching, and he's probably the most sought after coach, or in the top 3 of sought after coaches in the world, after what he's done in the last couple of years, and maybe slightly longer. But what he did was, find this slight, and I knew he was going to fight one way or another, because it was actually quite funny the way it came out. One, it was first of all that James Ryan hadn't made eye contact, and Aldred went back into the change room, told this to Ronan. Ronan's like, they don't respect us, they don't even look us in the eye. But actually, as it turned out, there was a slight change in translation, so it meant that he actually looked at him too long in the eye, and he was eyeballing him. So it was going to be a slight one way or the other. But that's what he does. He finds what he needs to motivate players, and this conversation about they're a small team. I actually think Leinster were incredibly respectful of La Rochelle. I think they're probably one of their key focuses all the year was on how La Rochelle beat them in the final last year, and actually the year before that, and what they could do to beat them, and how focused they needed, and the type of performance they needed to deliver. And I think we saw that in the opening 20 minutes. So, but if Ronan needs to say it to his team that they think we're the small team, then good on him and do it. He's going to increasingly find that difficult if they keep on winning Heineken Cups.
It's very Michael Jordan, isn't it?
Yeah.
You always hear that one where he was in a restaurant and the opposition's coach was in the restaurant and didn't speak to him, and he was like, right, if you're going to be rude to me, I'm going to make sure I play better. And it's sort of creating that thing. It's an easy sell to your players. Such an easy sell.
He's not afraid to get stuck in himself, though, Rog, is he? Because apparently there was a tunnel bust up at half-time with him and his old mate Sean O'Brien and Will Skelton getting involved as well. Again, did you get any wind of this on the day?
No, I didn't hear. I heard it afterwards, and I heard Sexton was there. I know that I would imagine the Leinster players were sort of aware of Rodgers' predisposition to having a word with referees at half time, and there was a lot. Well, he did the year before by all accounts, and it's not unknown for him to do it in the French league as well. So apparently the referees' change room is near the Leinster one, and the two guys, Sexton and O'Brien, were acting as bodyguards and wouldn't let him in.
The referee room.
And I was thinking, I just have this funny picture of Sexton and O'Gara, but actually more intimidating. It's O'Brien versus Skelton. Christ almighty, who'd get in between them?
That's tectonic plates going at each other. Interestingly, though, and we're talking about the referee. I mean, do you have any complaints, grumbles? Brian Moore wrote a very good article today just saying Leinster had more than enough opportunity to win that game. You've touched already on the opportunity for a drop goal, etc.
No, and listen, I've spoken about this through the eyes of analysing Leinster and where they sort of left it out there. Not that they did or they didn't capitalise. Listen, there's a whole another podcast we can do on how La Rochelle won it, because they did. Nobody handed it to them. They were fully deserving of the win, as I thought they were last time out as well. So there's no debate about that. The refereeing, did he get some stuff wrong? Yeah, he did. And there was a clear out for the La Rochelle try that you could pick up, but there's bits of that in every game. I don't really have an issue with it at all. And to be honest with you, I thought that the yellow card for in the first half with the tap and go, I thought that was a little bit harsh, I have to say, against La Rochelle. So listen, there is not a game, I feel, that Leinster could point to and say that the referee had an influence to such a degree that we didn't allow us to win. And it would have been the same for La Rochelle if Leinster had won. They couldn't have pointed and said, we were hard done by the referee. I think, when I watched, I haven't watched it back since, I won't lie to you, although I tried to. I watched the first few minutes, and then when it started going downhill,
started rolling down your
after
cheek
11 minutes, I was like, I can't do this. Maybe give me.
I'm like Leinster. You watched the first 11 minutes. Oh, we won the game. We won the game.
And then I woke up. So.
No complaints with the referees. Is that what Johnny Sexton was saying to Jaco Paper at the end?
I don't think so. I think he maybe had a couple of sterner words, but I think it just reflects the situation of the game that Sexton's maybe his last ever involvement in Leinster. I don't think he's unless he comes back as a coach at some point, but who knows what the future will bring there. You can always pick something out of a game to be disappointed with the referee. It's obviously everything intensifies with the final, especially when you're that far ahead. And Sexton has sometimes difficulty with sort of controlling that. Now, I think there was a few others that were having a word as well. It's I'm not going to say it's part of the game, and if they're sanctioned, they'll be sanctioned. But and referees have to be protected. But much like O'Gara maybe having a word at halftime, I kind of get it, and I know you're not meant to say that, and I know everyone's meant to be completely respectful and never have their emotions under control at all times. And it's probably not good for kids, and I recognise all that. But the real politique of what this meant for players, and as I said, the pressure and anxiety and the requirement almost for Leinster and this generation of players to win, and that much on the line. Sometimes people do foolish things, and while you don't condone it, I think you can sometimes understand it.
Yeah, it's what we always talk about is fans and everyone want to see players play with passion, play right on that edge. But but then can't take it if it sometimes goes the other way. It's even more frustrating when you're watching and not playing, and because you have no control over it. You cannot affect anything. So that's when frustration gets even higher. As long as it didn't get too bad, but we'll find out, won't we?
Does it hurt more because it's Rog?
Yeah, it does. It does, because I think I said it at the start. It's almost it reopens that wound that was there for Leinster and Munster for so long, and that it's almost a sort of confirmation of maybe, as I said, some of the stereotypes that Rog had. And Rog would have had to have them, and it was positive for him. And like, that's not a critique. I love Rog, you know, but he definitely sort of built Leinster into that type of team, and Munster were seen as a different team. And you know what? They were right for a long period, but it did feel after the semi-final in Croke Park that sort of ledger started to balance out a little bit more until sort of Leinster got into top, you know, where they are now. Now, listen, there's definitely another chapter to come on that story with Munster, but just, you know, for the last 10 years, it has been quite a lot of dominance, and you could never say that, you know, Leinster weren't a team that were sort of grit and delivery of result. So Rog almost single-handedly has, you know, reopened that wound, and, you know, fair play to him for doing it. He's inspired his players to be able to do it. I tell you what was a nice moment, and it did make me, you know, it did make me happy within all the disappointment. I was sitting on the second tier, and just below me was the core of the La Rochelle support. And, you know, they were obviously very disappointed at the start of the game. It was very, very quiet. And, you know, just as, you know, they'd taken the lead, they were going crazy. You know, they were going crazy. And a little bit later on, and then, you know, I think it was just actually when the Leinster player was sent off, and it looked like that's it. They had won. I looked down, and there was a little boy down there, and he was bawling, weeping, and you could see it was pure relief. And then I looked down closer, and it was Jess O'Gara, Roger's wife, and obviously their son. And it was absolutely a beautiful moment that this boy was living every moment with his father, and had been so, I'm sure, so stressed out and anxiety ridden for the entire game when it looked like his father's team were going to lose. And then this such unbridled relief that meant that the tears flowed. So, you know, and in the embrace of his mother was one of the most touching things I've ever seen, and made me realize the beauty of sport, and maybe for a moment put aside my own my own disappointment to revel in the you know, this beautiful moment with Ronan and his family.
You have described that quite beautifully. Who was crying more, you or Ronan's son?
Yeah, no, I was crying into my pint later on, thanks to the good people at Heineken.
Lovely plug,
Yeah.
Dream Ambassador.
But I mean, you can take back for once in a game of rugby, La Rochelle won every stat. So, you know, territory, possession, meters, defenders beaten, line breaks, gain line carries, everything, offloads. So maybe the right team did win.
Maybe.
But it all comes down to goal kicking.
Yeah.
You know, you get two
But
that's the
there
thing.
was honestly, I don't think there's any doubt the best team won. Like, there's no doubt about that. I don't think even, you know, there's many making the case that they didn't. It's just that
It's just the way
there was
after that first 20 minutes. Yeah.
the opportunity was there, and you do think, when will Leinster ever get another opportunity like that? Well, it would be another 10 years maybe before there's a game in Dublin, a final in Dublin. So all you know, immediately it makes things more difficult.
I was just going to say very quickly, I bet there are some Northampton fans who've messaged you this week saying, dry your eyes, Shane. It's not that nice when the shoe's on the other foot, is it?
It's one of the many reasons I'm not on social media.
Quite right too.
I was going to say, obviously, Aviva, the pressure that was on Ireland to win that Grand Slam, I don't think they really put their best foot forward in that.
You're itching to get into this, aren't you? Go on, fire in,
No,
fire
I'm not,
in.
because I do think I want to, because it'd be so good, and I get so many pelters back. In the fact
What
that
you're trying to insinuate here is
France won, Ireland 0.
Yeah.
But they 1-1 actually, because they won the game in Dublin in the Six Nations. But is it, you know, are we seeing the fact of Johnny Sexton's not on the field, that things don't go quite to plan?
What are you trying to do to me here? It's like, it's, you know, like that Simpsons. He's already dead. Stop kicking me. This is just, I don't know.
But are you genuinely concerned now that of the repercussions around Leinster getting done at home by a French side when all the chips were there, the fast start, etc., and no Johnny Sexton?
Well, listen, it is concerning, you know, and without Sexton, I think we realise how good he is, and I honestly think we don't lose that game if Sexton plays, and if he plays the second half, it doesn't pan out in that way, and he drops a goal. I think that happens. So, you know, you do take that from I suppose what is concerning is that I agree with Trin, and that the Ireland didn't deliver against, a brilliant performance in that last game of the Six Nations. So, they got over the line, and there was a sending off, and that was helpful. But it wasn't a brilliant performance. Definitely the anxiety that can come. Well, let's call it maybe performance anxiety is probably not the right word. That means something else. But the pressure that comes in to deliver your best over the course of 80 minutes. Listen. What Leinster needed to do, we knew that there was the power of La Rochelle. We knew the final last year they scored 3 tries. Leinster couldn't compete with that. You can't keep these guys out. So that means you have to keep on. You have to stop them as best you can, and then you have to keep on playing, and you have to keep on scoring. And they went into the game with that mindset. But somewhere along the road, they lost it. Fatigue was a factor, by the way, because I think the amount of adrenaline that they dumped into their bodies in that first half meant that it felt almost that they were sort of running on a little bit empty in that second half. And I saw ringrows going around trying to uplift players and tell them to stand up and breathe in that second half, which is an unusual thing for Leinster, and one that you wouldn't necessarily, or the stereotype is it would be the other way around, and it certainly it wasn't. And La Rochelle have proved that 3 times now against Leinster, that they don't slow down; they keep on going for the 80 minutes. So, I suppose the cut on the brass tacks of this is, if Ireland get into a quarter final when everything is on the line and they have to deliver a 80-minute quality performance in the most intense pressure, and even more intense pressure than a Six Nations Grand Slam where they've been before, or even more pressure than a deciding match against the All Blacks, where there's no real nobody's going to castigate them for losing that game, where it's all on the line. Again, in a quarter final against France or against New Zealand, will they deliver? Now, the other thing about that is they could deliver a phenomenal performance and still lose that game. That's the other thing. Ireland might have a really good World Cup and might not make it to a semi-final. And maybe we just have to, we maybe have to accept that. But what we couldn't, or we'd find difficult to accept, is that we have a second half performance like we saw Leinster at the weekend, or indeed, a performance like we saw against England that maybe wouldn't have gone the same way.
Do we just think we've got him? Do you think we just made him
You're
agree
certainly
with us?
scattering the seeds in quite big handfuls at the moment.
Do you think we've got it?
I think, listen, Sexton is a big deal. Now, we don't know if Sexton's going to play all the games of the World Cup, but he is a big factor. He's a big factor for Ireland performance in so many ways. And the debate has opened up around Ross Byrne as well, I think. But listen, there's loads of positives. The Ireland are as in a good shape as they've ever been going into World Cup. Yes, this is going to sting. There's another way to look at it. Is this, additional motivation? What will they have learned from this? They'll realize that we are not going to win anything unless we play all the way. I would say as well that Andy Farrell, the way they play under Andy Farrell is slightly different than the way Leinster play. I think Leinster are very, very controlled, very, very structured, very much to a pattern, where Ireland are a little bit looser, and maybe that lack of inhibition will play into a less anxiety-ridden performance.
So what you're saying is Lancaster going is a great thing. You're happy about that? Oh my God, he's dropping clangers left, right and centre.
Not at all. And this is what I feel. I feel terrible. I feel terrible for these guys, because this is one of the other pressures that, like, Lancaster deserved another European Cup. He's been revolutionary for Leinster, and we saw the best traits in him and Leo Cullen as a coach out there as well. We saw them in the opening moments. It's exactly what they would have done. The rucking, as I said to you before, was ridiculous. How low, how accurate, how explosive it was. Every option seemed to be the right one. So listen, there's nobody questioning them, and I know Leinster would like to hold on to him forever, I'm sure. But the horrible thing is, he now isn't going to get an opportunity with Leinster to win again. And, you don't know how often these opportunities come around. This generation might have missed it. And certainly some of them have, because it won't be the same squad next year as it was this or the year before.
Final question on Leinster, and then I want to pick top 5 European Champions Cup finals of all time, or Heineken Cup as they were. Does this feel like a bit of a changing of the guard at Leinster? Stuart Lancaster going, Johnny Sexton probably on his way, Cian Healy possibly, probably. hanging up his boots afterwards, certainly not as prominent. I mean, it's not a mass change, but there are some very influential figures who are going to move on at this junction.
Yeah, it's not a mass change. I think the new Lancaster going out, new South African forwards coach coming in doesn't, for me, feel like a completely natural fit for Leinster, but who knows how that how that plays out. Let's see the role of Sean O'Brien over the next 12 months as well. I think that would be increased visibility from him. Sexton going is an issue. They have to address that loss as well, and that debate, as I said, has opened up. Selection issues in the second row. I was very surprised Ryan Baird didn't start. What they do in the second row, and this is an issue for Ireland as well, we didn't see enough of Doris Conan. Had a brilliant opening spell and was, I think, good. I was surprised he came off when he did, but we didn't see Doris carry in the way that he might, because you know what, you can't have two guys carrying like that. Someone has to do the donkey work, and it's Doris. But is Doris the guy to do that? You don't. It seems like maybe a little bit wasteful. That's maybe something to revisit. But I like having those three in the back row, and they would be my back row selection as well. But do you swap them around? They're kind of the key questions. It's generational more, because I think because of Lancaster's going and what that really means. We don't know how the dice will land after he leaves.
Is this the same Shane Horgan that we normally talk to? Not only we've somehow, to do a hask, we've managed to turn our Premiership final this weekend into the Average Joes against Globo Gym.
Yeah,
and then you're basically saying that Leinster didn't win because they didn't because La Rochelle left everything out in the field. So you've turned them into the LSU Mud Dogs from the Waterboy because they left everything out there and Leinster didn't. So we're just
no. Listen, they are. Listen, no, don't be showing this. Rog will have this up. He'll be playing to his players next year. They are the aristocrats of European rugby, and they sit firmly at the head after 2 wins. And actually, do you know what? You'll remember back to a couple of years ago when they lost in the final to Toulouse. Tactically, they had that game.
Yeah, they
and
did.
You could see O'Gara's fingerprints all over it. They had it until the sending off, and that was the difference between them. Other than that, these guys would have done a triple crown of Hydrogen Cups.
They are, and he certainly is the greatest European rugby icon of the competition.
They could easily win this top 14 as well. They're in great shape to do it. So listen, this guy's legacy, Roger's legacy, is going to be a joke, and what he does next is going to be very, very interesting. And
can we do the other way? Can we get him an England coach?
Yeah. Well, here, listen, there's only 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs that O'Gara would leave, I think, and he might say different, that would leave La Rochelle for, and none of them are in club rugby. The next stage of his career development, it'll have to be international rugby. So Ireland obviously is the one that he would want and the dream that he would want, but Farrell's in good shape pending a good World Cup, but I think he's going to be there, and there's others in the back room that will have an eye on the elevation there at some point in the future as well. So there's that. The other one is Australia, which would be a good job, I think, potentially, and you see how they go in the World Cup. But that's they may be interested in him. That was something that they could do, but that's a big move. There's only one other job, and that's the England job. And depends what goes on, I believe, in the World Cup for you guys, and that whether that's open earlier or later than the Ireland position.
Just imagine England-Ireland games in the Six Nations. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact Roger's living rent-free in D4 at the moment, which is a fairly lucrative place to be living. Imagine he's just got the whole of Ireland and he's rattling around in their heads. I tell you what, I mean, it's fascinating to get your insight on it. Can you share what you sent to Rog? Did you say Felicitation or ye fucker? You've done us again.
Oh, no, I just said that, congrats to him. It was a truly remarkable performance, and I told him I was sick, and he was great. And he came back early the next morning. He obviously had a controlled night, and he was very, very nice, and a nice message. And I just shared the story about Jess as well, because it honestly it was a beautiful moment within this incredible sort of scene that was panning out. There was such devastation on one side and then such joy on the other. So he's a great bit of stuff.
He really is. He is a hell of a character. Can we very quickly, because there was a lot of emotion off the back of the game, and everyone's saying it is the greatest final of all time as far as European Cups. go. Do you want to stand by that, or can I read out some alternatives and we'll just pick a quick top 5? So if we're going top 5, does La Rochelle Leinster get into that?
Oh yeah. This one, I think so. If it's not a million miles off the top one, there's one other that springs to mind, which we'll come on to. But
Wasps Toulouse in London, does that get into a top 5?
That is one that will always stick in my mind. So I would say yes, that does get.
Rob
into.
Howley, that was.
Yeah.
Leinster 32, Northampton 22, top 5.
Go on, get in there.
Bath 19, Brive 18.
Again, finished in a very, very dramatic way, didn't it? With JC knocking over that kick. First time an English team was taking it away from a French team.
I'll put maybe. Question mark. Ulster against Colomiers. Shane? You surprise me. Leicester 34, Stade Francais 30.
Yeah,
Leon Lloyd.
that is another one that
That's in
always comes into mind.
Munster 23, Biarritz 19. Not necessarily an amazing game, but a hell of a story.
Yeah, I
Maybe.
think for the story, you got to think yes.
Toulon did 3 in a row. Their third title, 24-18 over Clermont. I'm not sure. I mean, Toulon were a hell of a team. I'm not sure they ever delivered a final of.
A lot of those, you'd have said that Clermont tripped over their own feet again, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Do you know a quick one on that? And I did think about this, that Toulon team was wildly successful, but I think outside their fan base, I don't think it was ever loved. You know,
no,
it
true.
did feel a little bit
It was
mercenary.
always seen as manufactured, though, wasn't it?
It did, yeah. Whereas La Rochelle have loads of imports as well, but it doesn't feel like that at all, does it? Like, you know, if La Rochelle weren't beating Leinster, like La Rochelle would be your second team. It's that kind. It's a different feeling, and I think they've been brilliant for the competition. They've been amazing for the competition. But yeah, they're loved in a different way than Toulon, who I don't think ever really were.
I think that's a very good point. And I think to get into our top 5, you have to bring an element of romance to the top tier competition in European rugby. So the last one I'll give you is Leinster 19, Leicester 16, 2009.
I would take it all day long. Tins may say something different, but the story of that with the semi-final and 10 years on the road, for me it was, of course. But I'm happy to be dissuaded.
So we've got 4. You can pick one, therefore, from Bath, Brive, Munster, Biarritz, or Leinster, Leicester. Tins, I'll give you the vote.
We love selling a story here. Munster's story in 2006 was a great one.
Okay, so I presume because they've been a maybe. So Bath goes, Leinster, Leicester goes. So Munster, Biarritz in 5th as the all-time great finals, which means you can pick from, in 4th place, Leicester, Stade, Leinster, Northampton, Wasps, Toulouse, or La Rochelle, Leinster.
Leicester Stade, but again, I'm invested. I'm invested in some of these games.
So 3-2-1 from Leinster, Northampton, Wasps, Toulouse, La Rochelle, Leinster. I think Wasps, Toulouse might be 3rd. Although it was Howley.
Yeah.
It was a hell of a final, that.
Give that second and split the Leinsters.
Okay. So Wasps, Toulouse. So best final of all time. La Rochelle 27, Leinster 26, or Leinster 33, Northampton 22.
The best one is seeing the Dublin boys get what's coming to them.
Ouch. So I think Northampton, it was a remarkable comeback, but Northampton were running on fumes that day.
It was a bigger comeback. I know it was at half time. It was a bigger turnaround,
yeah.
I believe. But listen, I'm the blow-in here, so Tins, it's over to you. It's your show. It's your show.
So are you going La Rochelle? We've got to make a call. Are you going La Rochelle Leinster as the greatest final of all time? It was an away game for La Rochelle. It was 17-0 down.
In Leinster's home city.
Yeah, it had spice off the field.
In their not home stadium.
It had their nemesis in the opposition coaching box.
It did. It has the story, it has the passion, it has everything that you want in the Heineken Cup.
We're picking from a rich
European
bunch.
Cup.
Well, and that's only
we've got to
revisit
revisit this. We can revisit this after 12 months.
Okay.
There's a recency bias here. There's a recency bias.
I tell you what we'll do.
I might go watch the others and I might come back and have a
poll
little
up.
thing. Yeah, let's do a poll.
And we'll see what the people decide. Munster, Biarritz, Leicester, Stade.
Or if we've missed a game that...
Leinster, Northampton, Wasps, Toulouse, La Rochelle, Leinster. Let's stick it up and see what happens. Dry your eyes. It was a hell of a game, if that's any consolation, Shane. It's been very good to get your debrief on it. I hope in some ways Ireland can solve the pain for you in a few months' time, but Tins has got his crowbar in.
The pubs are open now, mate.
Yeah. I feel this is decent. I feel this is some sort of talk therapy for me. You got to get it out before you can move on.
Don't bottle it inside, mate. Don't bottle it inside.
No, let it out. Don't add it to the pit.
And to be fair, your mob have handed out their fair amount over the last 15 years or so. So the odd one between the eyes.
Isn't it weird that success really sometimes divides you. People love you, and then people just want to see you lose. It's
Do you think Leinster are in that place at the moment where they are a team that people want to see lose, as opposed to?
I think they are generally. I think there's a respect for the way they play, but there's it's bizarre. Listen, they didn't win. They haven't won a trophy for the last 2 years. They haven't won Europe. I think is it 4 or 5 years maybe. They are very, very dominant force. They're from sort of the capital city. They generate a lot of players, and they do exceptionally well in the in their domestic league. They just don't lose very many games, so that can get sort of boring. And nobody likes to see. Maybe the analogy here is to some degree with Man City, where nobody wants to see the same team win all the time. You want to see a mixed trend. Now, listen, Ireland, Leinster haven't won all the time, but at some point, you want to see it spread around a bit. But listen, everyone's team is La Rochelle, but they win it another year. Does anybody want to see them win next year? No way. We'll change it up.
I think what also doesn't work in Leinster's favour is everyone sees it as the island team.
Yeah.
So it's like the island team couldn't beat La Rochelle,
and with a home quarter
which
semi
with Dara,
final,
who's in our sales team, who's a Connaught fan, was like, it really pisses me off. It's not the island team. What about who the two that are missing? Tag.
Peter O'Mahony, and Mac Hansen, really.
Mac Hansen,
The rest, it can be the rest.
Yeah, you're about right. I hope you get over it. I'm sure you will. We will see you hopefully in the run-up to France. It could be a hell of a tournament.
That could be fun.
All pressure on you boys.
Not anymore. All the pressure's off now.
No,
we're busted flush.
No,
We're just going to
yet.
turn up and just play our rugby.
Thank you for coming for a debrief. Look after yourself. Summer well, and we'll speak to you soon, Shane. Good on you.
Cheers, mate.
See you, man. Thanks a mil.
There he goes. That is as an emotional former player as we've had on this show for a long time. It goes to show you, A, what Leinster means to the area and to the people, etc. But I think also what an epic final it was, because if it's not epic, you don't hurt quite like that.
Well, yeah, and if it's that good a final, if it's taken you back to your sort of playing days and how much you so wanted to win, I think it takes a lot to do that. I'd say that the England game, obviously from a different side, England winning in 2019 against the All Blacks, and that performance took me back to a really emotional buy-in to that team. And I was like, right, I'm ready. And then my next week was an emotional flop because I thought they were going to win the World Cup final. I'd made peace with it. I was ready for that team that played that way to do it, and then I was very deflated the next week.
But surprised. I like the fact it lives on in all of you who get to the top. We're going to bring in our next guest very short. I quickly wanted to get your reaction on the news that Alan Wynne-Jones and Justin Tipperick have retired from international rugby with immediate effect, meaning they will not be going to Rugby World Cup 2023. 158 Wales caps.
Story coming there at some point.
The news was announced within an hour of each other. 158 Wales caps, 12 Lions tests for Alan Wynne.
158 caps.
That is extraordinary, isn't it? 93 tests for Justin Tipperick and 1 for the Lions. Is that a story? Do you think that's into pre-camp? Am I going to get any assurances I'm going to the World Cup? I can't give you those assurances, therefore I'm not sure I can keep going. I can't imagine either players like that.
I don't think either player is that guy who just if their place isn't assured that they would retire off the back of it. I mean, they're not really retiring on the legacy anyway with the Six Nations, how that went. So I don't know. I think there's something more. Wales have got their own issues now in terms of, even with the 25 cap rule, they're losing a couple of their players are the young kids who've moved over to into England. So I don't know. I think there is probably something there. There might have been a straight up chat and saying we actually do need to try and move on. We've got to draw a line in the sand somewhere. Thank you for all your service, but is it the right thing? I don't know.
Well done to both of you on extraordinary careers. Obviously far more eloquent people than I.
By the way, Alan Wynne-Jones, one of the greatest arguably ever.
Yeah. Longevity, achievement.
It's just
4 Six Nations titles.
It's got to be hard for Tipperick. Retire. Oh, I'm going to retire. Oh, me too, mate.
So let me just say, Alan Wynne, Justin Tipperick,
done.
Amongst the all-time greats.
Well, yes, well done. Feet up. Technically, Alan Wynne's 93. So, it's about time he had a rest. He's done it. He's been around for a long time.
Remarkable careers both. Well done to Alan Wynne-Jones and Justin Tipperick. We've obviously had Alan Wynne on the show before. We hopefully will do again. Justin,
Alan
be great
from
to check in.
Wales.
Alan from Wales. You move over to that side of the bench while we bring in our next guest. And as we introduce him, we've obviously been talking all things European rugby to this point. It has been a fairly turbulent season in the top flight of English rugby as well. The professional era has certainly had its challenges over the last 20, 25 years or so, but the last 12 months has been right up there. We've had 2 historic clubs going bust. We've got rumours of another in trouble, yet the product on the pitch is in rude health right now. We've got swashbuckling rugby each week. We've got a fantastic final to look forward to as well. So in the studio, I think we'll call it a sort of end-of-term report, if you will. It is the Premiership CEO, Simon Massie-Taylor, who's brought the pot with him as well. I'm sure that's had a bit of polish, certainly from some of the bashes and dents it's had over the last 12 months or so. Simon, lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Can we start with Europe first of all? Were you there at the weekend, and how much did that atmosphere fill the coffers for a new tournament in a new guise next season?
It was rugby at its best, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really, international club. It was one of the best games I've ever seen, and it was a real privilege to actually be there and to feel it. And you did feel it. You felt it right at the beginning, with this unbelievable home support, that try in the first minute, and then right up to the end, and you felt everything, every single emotion, and you go there as a neutral, and you can't help just be completely captivated by it. It was amazing.
And from a sort of administrator's point of view, we're sort of reading in the press about what Europe is going to look like, but how much does that fill the enthusiasm levels, and I suppose the opportunity to get European rugby back to where it should be?
Yeah, I think we definitely saw a turning point post-Christmas in the tournament and the Champions Cup. I think as a property, it was probably most hit by COVID, cross-border travel, and I think it struggled throughout that. But what we saw this season was really encouraging. So attendances are up, I think, 20+% across the board. Broadcast figures across the board have been positive, really positive. And I think in the UK, I think we saw our largest free-to-air audiences. But we know we've got a relevance issue within England, especially. And so I think that's the real hard work that goes on from our side now. We need teams that are really competitive. And we need to rekindle those rivalries that were such an important part of European rugby and Heineken Cup rugby.
I was going to say, we see what's the main take of the South Africans being in there as a massive plus? Obviously, crowd attendance, that would have helped their stadiums, even though they look empty, but they're not very empty because they're massive stadiums.
Yeah, I think first of all they've just entered it with gusto. They're taking it super serious, and the South African fans are really interested in it already. And so I think it took a bit of time. I think they were sort of understanding what's the difference between this and URC, but they've embraced it. And I think when they've come over here, there's been an interest. I mean, I think sort of the Quinn Stormers piece, and then vice versa. I think teams have really embraced going to South Africa and touring there and experiencing it. So I think they've been a really positive addition.
Can you give us therefore a break? Because what we're reading in the papers, you never quite know whether that's fact or not. What does Europe next season look like? Is it going back to the pools?
Yeah, that's the intention, to move back to a pool format. That's not official, but hopefully we get that sorted in the next week or so. And then there's a long-term question as to what the right format is and the right number of teams within the competition. So it's a 24-team comp this year, and it will be next year. But then getting the right configuration. So you need to create competitiveness, and you need to create jeopardy, especially in those early rounds. And so I think that's been one of the call-outs from clubs and fans as to how to make those early rounds more interesting, exciting.
And it's going to be 6 teams in each pool. I'm just throwing this out there. Hopefully you can confirm it. 2 from the Prem, 2 from URC, 2 from the top 14. You won't play the side from your own league. So you'll play 4 pool games essentially from the teams in the opposite leagues. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the intention. And then you move to the knockout.
And what impact do you think that has in terms of what it has been in these sort of 2 leagues of 12 where no one quite knows who's coming or going? What does going back to that pool setup give the competition?
It's simpler to explain to the fan. It's not perfect, but it's simpler to explain to the fan. I think going forward we need something that you can literally write in a sentence.
Yeah. Why are you laughing?
I know. You just go back to all the great final days of the Heineken Cup where you were like, if they beat them by 17 points and you had everyone had always the ultimate rugby Norse would map out what everything needed.
The miracle
to happen,
match, still one of the greatest moments of modern professional rugby.
Yeah. I don't think many of the Gloucester boys agree with that, but and that was when it was at its best, was when you have those scenarios where you know what's going on. Whereas I think for the last couple of seasons, people have just sort of looked at the league cross-eyed, and someone who's won one game can end up getting through and then go all the way or whatever. So,
can I ask you? And this is my particular area of passion. What are the sponsors saying to you about the new setup? Have you had those conversations with Heineken, etc., or have you got to get it all sorted before you can then go to the sponsors?
I think everyone's being consulted in that. So the sponsors, the broadcasters are super important, but there's also been a huge piece of work with the fans across all different types of formats. You know, what suits them, what are they interested in? And you also got to think about travelling fans as well. And that's when you start thinking about when it is in the season.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as soon as you've qualified, or you know, have you got time, have you got the resources to be able to go and travel abroad and go and watch it? So all those things need to be factored in, as well as a lot of statistical work to work out how you create jeopardy and what the right format is.
And are you confident that it is going to be a better competition next year?
Yes, yeah. And I think we've definitely, as I say, broke the back in interest. And I think going back to this weekend, now as far as creating stories, like that is amazing what happened last weekend, and a big shot in the arm for the competition. So I think we build from there, we build from those interests, but I think also we need to work hard within England to make sure that fans understand and follow European rugby and get it back to where it is.
Okay,
sounds like there was a bit of jeopardy in the tunnels as well.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to be they're now a rivalry, aren't they? Guess they're probably not going to like each other for the next couple of years.
But they'll still be at the sharp end, you imagine. Both of them aren't going anywhere in a hurry. Can we dive into the Premiership? We had a good catch up. Was it January? It feels like a lifetime ago. And that was obviously the I suppose the immediate aftermath of Wasps and Worcester going bust. When you look now at the end of this season, I mean, you've done 18 months in the job now. Has it been considerably more turbulent? Because I know you've said in the past you knew what you were getting into. Has it been a deeper dive even than you were expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I think I knew I was walking into a very disrupted business and set of businesses with the clubs, and I also knew, eyes wide open, that it was going to continue for a while yet. And I think we're still clearly experiencing it at the moment. So that time has really been spent in trying to get the foundations right, and trying to get to a point where we can create more stability and move forward. And so that's been where a lot of the hard work is, whilst managing, the aftermath of Wasps and Worcester, which was obviously horrific.
Yeah,
I was going to say, is it a business? Currently, it just doesn't feel like you've got this great product on the pitch, but yet all we can hear about is how it just financially doesn't work. So what are the changes that are going to have to be made to make a professional rugby team be profitable, and attractive to owners?
Yeah,
I think if you sort of break it down, when it comes to the resources we've got within the UK or within England, there's no doubt that we've got, to the product point, abundance of talent and some great brands and some good geographical presence and various other things. So I think we've got the resources there, and within that we've got some great academies and a lot of decent infrastructure. From a revenue point of view, it's a large market, right? It's a sort of 350 million plus market, and it's probably the largest or one of the largest rugby economies in the world. The cost base the revenue base hasn't caught up with the cost base, and that's kind of obvious. And so the stabilisation piece needs to get us there as quickly as possible, because then that gets the capital that is needed to move forward. And so a lot of work is being spent on trying to create the right conditions for future investment. So that's when you go into things like governance, that's when you go into a lot of the infrastructure within the game and the relationship with the RFU and various other things. So that this phase around stabilisation is around getting those foundation elements in to encourage the investors to come in and do it as quickly as possible.
We did a show last week. I think we did a show last week. I can't remember very much about it. There was a lot of talking over each other, but one of the things that fell out of that was the fact that there is obviously a lot going on behind the scenes within rugby at the moment. And the main reason for inviting you on is to try and give our listeners and viewers the opportunity to pack up and go on their summer holidays, believing almost that we're at the bottom of the crisis. There may yet, and I think most people are expecting another fairly chunky headline to fall out of that. But when you sit here now, do you believe, sort of the obvious elephant in the room being London Irish apart, that this scenario within the domestic game in England has reached the bottom and that you are now building back in ways that every rugby fan wants you to? Or is there still leaks in the bottom of the bucket and major issues that you're going to have to fix before you can start genuinely saying we are now on the way back up again?
I think knowing what I know now, especially around club finances, which has been one of the things that I wasn't clear on when coming into this role because there wasn't that transparency. I think I can say now that we can manage the league into a more stable situation. It will take time, it will take some discipline, but I think current situation aside, I think I can be very confident on that side of things. And then equally, going the work we're doing around governance changes and various other things is super important. And again, we're getting traction. And so I think I've got the alignment also within the game, both within the clubs, but also within our other relationships with various other stakeholders that are important to us to get there.
How do you go do that? You've got a market where players such as Anthony Watson can't get a club because no club can afford him, and they know he's going to be away, and they don't see him as a specialised position. But also salaries around the board. No player wants to take a pay cut. Yet we've taken $3 million off the salary cap. How do we fill those holes and those gaps to allow? And then plus England players now can't travel abroad, or they still technically can't travel abroad and play for England. It seems that we're making it pretty hard.
Yeah. So I think it's a really important principle to have England internationals playing in the Premiership. It's good for the Premiership, and it's also from an England setup, having the access and ability to influence the clubs there is really important. But you're right, we've got a market issue at the moment, and that's. I think there's a few misconceptions around the salary cap. So if I may, can I just explain?
Please do so.
I will.
The floor is yours.
Well, so for a start, our salary cap isn't a hard cap. So it's currently at 5 million. But actually, in the combination of all the credits that you get for homegrown talent, academies, the marquee players, actually clubs are spending close to 7.5 million this year, even with a reduced cap of
Is that every club, or is that some of the clubs?
That's the average. Right?
That's the average.
And so if you compare ourselves to France, whose cap is much more hard, that's around 9.3 million, right? So you've got a sort of £2 million gap at the moment. And so that used to be smaller, right? There's always been a gap with France, but it's widened in the last few years as we've reduced the cap. Now, to make things more challenging, next year is the sort of final year of when players are coming out of contract that was signed up just before the cap went down. And with that, there was a sort of credit system where you could sign them up for 75% of their value, right? So you're getting England players coming out for next season who are having to be signed up at full fat value whilst the cap's still down. Now after next year, so that's caused some of this.
Is that why Exeter have moved so many on? Because they, yes,
yeah, essentially yes. And so players have been coming out of contract for a year, have been faced with the reality, but also the opportunity of being able to make that choice to go and play abroad and sacrifice your England money. Now, the following season, 24-25, which is only a season away, the cap is intended to go back up, and so to 6.4,
okay,
which means that the average spends will be much more narrower to the French system. So it will be more like sort of 1.5, 1.4, which is actually the narrowest it's been since we've been recording it. Okay, because actually what's happening in France is they're trying to reduce their cap as well and manage spend. But then if you go deeper and you start looking at top talent, and so your top 10, your top 20, your top 40 players. We spent some time with the LNR to understand how that works and what the comparison is. Now, it's quite hard to do because of tax systems and various other things, but they're pretty similar. And so what we're seeing is probably opportunities, not necessarily for the top 40, but maybe players 40 to 100 in the Premiership, where if you come out of contract, you're always going to get that opportunity to make that choice to go abroad or not. And it's probably, so I think that is a reality, but it becomes a lot more manageable when the cap goes back up. Now, clearly, there's a sort of double-edged sword to the cap going back up, and that's around financial sustainability. And so we've got to balance this need to keep quality players within Prem in the English system to help England and help the Prem, versus this sort of financial sustainability piece, which we're all really conscious of.
But how are you going to then manage someone like Jack Willis, who didn't have a choice about it, and he's had to take whatever he can get to protect it, like just to earn cash? How are you then going to say to work that? How is everything going to work about ever getting him back? Because obviously he's getting a better player. He's actually becoming a far better player with Toulouse. Then his value will go up, and then how is he going to get back into it? The English system.
I mean, Jack was put in an impossible situation when obviously Wasps went bust, and so there was an exceptional circumstance made for him so he continued playing rugby, top level rugby, and I believe that will extend to next season. But the idea is that once the cap goes back up, and we've stabilised the system, that there'll be playing opportunities for him and other players to remain in the system. So it is important long term. We recognise the issue that's existed over the last couple of years, but we need to get back to an equilibrium.
I never thought that bringing marquee players like that, being able to just stick that value onto was ever going to work in a. Is there any way that marquee players might disappear rather than mess around with your cap?
So we're going down to one marquee player now as of next season. So it was two, and so it's going down to one. But I tend to agree. It's definitely had a sort of inflationary impact on the player market.
Because it's always going to make everyone else's salaries want to go up while you're paying.
Yeah, because you can't, even if you're not 100%.
Because players talk at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And actually most agents know exactly what everyone gets paid anyway.
Yeah. So in France, they don't have it. Yeah.
But they presumably they don't need it quite so much because they've got a bigger playing budget to work to anyway.
But they also make a lot more money off their TV rights, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
What is the TV market in France relative to here?
So there's a much smaller gap between football and rugby in France.
In France?
Yeah. And so, and actually just relative to us, football is less of a popular sport in France, and rugby is more of a popular sport than here. So that drives a lot of value there. And they use that sort of surplus money to reinvest into their second tier, and so that's really the market there.
So you couldn't put numbers against that?
I think.
What is the LNR? Is it 60 million euros somewhere? I completely made that up. I don't know why
it's 100 million plus.
100 million plus.
Yeah.
And here? Classified information.
Classified information, but it's all invested into the Premiership.
Can I therefore sort of move this on, because we've got stability at the moment, but one of the great challenges this season has been the fact that we've had Worcester players and Wasps players, which I presume is 80 players, heading onto the open market mid-season with no one having any room to kind of bring additional players into their roster. London Irish on the start line next season. Would you put a pound on that or not?
I think it's a really important week for the club. Now, the RFU have put a deadline for the 30th of May to give certainty for that reason, to give certainty to the players. And so I think it's not right for me to comment right at the moment, but it's a key week for that club.
You've got your pound in your pocket by the sound of it.
Do you think it's the right thing to have the RFU making those calls on a professional game when they basically run the grassroots of the game?
Well, they've
question
got
that Haskell always asks, isn't it?
Yeah.
People would ask when he was
here. Yeah, I mean they manage all the league structures from the top to the bottom at the moment. I think in the future how the professional game is managed or devolved to whether it's a sort of shared joint venture or something like that. I think that's one of the main things we're talking about at the moment. But yeah, they're the regulator.
Can you tell us why that decision has been made? So I've clipped up some of the stuff from the Telegraph, and we understand players are already talking to other clubs already, mainly in France. Amid mounting fears, there's little hope of a takeover by a US consortium going through in time to save the club. I think it's 5 working days as we record this, in which they're going to be able to sort of produce the documents that are needed. Again, reading from the Telegraph, however, the RFU and Premiership Rugby have yet to receive any proof of funds and other details required for the fit and proper person test, and due diligence, and there's little confidence among senior figures that the club will be safe from going under. Can you just give us a sort of a synopsis of what has been going on behind the scenes and why we are in this situation?
So the club's owner made it very public that he wasn't in a position to continue funding the club for personal reasons, which I guess you've got to respect. That clearly put a big for sale sign above the club and set the clock really to try and for the current owner to try and find a legacy for the club.
He put it up for sale for £1, didn't he?
Yep.
Well, you can keep the £1 I've given you and buy the club.
Yeah.
Find the 30 million to pay off the debts.
There's a bit of debt there as well.
Yeah.
And so that's really what this prospective investor needs to look at as to how to fund that and how to service the debt and fund the club to profitability. So that's the exam question there. But then you're reaching a point here, and this is why one of the key things coming out of this is around financial regulation of the clubs, right? So, and this happens in France, right? So where clubs need to give assurance to the league and to the other clubs that they're able to compete at least for 12 months ahead, right?
Yeah.
And so essentially that's basically why the timeline is there, and the deadline is to either for a commitment from the owner or for them to get an alternative solution to carrying on the club for the next 12 months.
And is this not an improvement necessarily, but is this a development off the back of the select committee hearing where, I can't remember the name of the gentleman, but he got very overexcited about the fact that English rugby wasn't putting in place the governance that was required? Is this now the new set of criteria that the game is having to adhere to, or is this as it always was?
We're in the process of establishing it formally for next season, so we're doing a whole consultation process.
Right.
But this is essentially one of the key strands that would exist anyway.
Yeah.
And so rightly the RFU are being clear around that deadline.
Okay.
Is the hardest thing for a club not having any? Well, because the Irish don't have any assets. Basically, do they? They don't own their own ground, and you can't ever really see anyone who doesn't own their own ground succeeding.
Yeah, I think it's really important because it also is an ancillary revenue stream, right? So you can do your conferences, you can do your events, you can hire it out to other things, concerts, other sports. So I think it's an important part of a rugby model. Not all clubs have it at the moment, but certainly if you look at.
So then, on your model, would you say having larger stadiums is would be a primary benefit if you could get your investment in that way? Because we always talk about what we do, and that you need bigger stadiums, less games, bigger stadiums, so you get more money off one game.
Yeah, I think all clubs are looking to ways to develop and expand their stadium, where it suits them. So yeah, absolutely. And in France, again, sort of, I feel slightly haunted by French rugby at the moment.
Yeah.
But in France, they have a lot of help locally. So their stadium are municipal stadiums, and they have a lot of help with utility bills.
Right.
I went to the LNR a few months ago, and we do a lot of work with them, and just to sort of illustrate how much I get sort of haunted by it at the moment, their chief exec gave me. They've actually got their own aftershave. It's called Eau de Brunus, which is the name of their trophy, and so it sort of just it showed me again. God, we haven't got our own aftershave. We're another step behind. Anyway, I went back home and my wife turns out that she loves the smell of Eau de Brunus. So
wow, it's like Sex Panther, isn't it?
That's every day. Oh, make sure you put that aftershave on.
I literally have to rub it in. French rugby is rubbed in every day. So yeah, thank you.
Wow, that's quite. I'm looking forward to Eau de Gallagher
made
Premiership.
for Anton de Pant's jock strap.
Yeah, exactly. That's unbelievable. You've got a lot of work to do. Yeah. Get on and do it quickly. Can I just ask you just about this London Irish? So other rumours around potentially the IRFU getting involved.
There's been speculation and talk by it. I mean, I think it's...
Is that logistically feasible, though? Because I can remember with London Welsh, the WRU thought we might have a bit of that. But can you have overseas governing bodies, as it were, investing into the Premiership?
It spits out a load of issues, as you can imagine. And so for that to be a realistic proposition, you'd have to jump over a number of hurdles.
So unlikely.
One of them being that one of the key parts and conditions around our league is that you generate English qualified players. These are assets to the English system, and they need to generate a number of players that are can be qualified to play for England. So that's one element, but also clearly you've got another system basically training on your territory, if you know what I mean. So how does that work? So I think there's a load of things that would need to be considered there, and it's not of immediate consideration, certainly for this timeline that the club owner's working to at the moment.
It's not going to be a 6-day turnaround.
No, that's very true.
Right.
So what that does lead on to, and obviously without wanting to sort of speculate, but certainly in the instances of Wasps and Worcester, I mean, there was news last week about the fact that Wasps were off down to the Counties 4 Midlands West, where even I might get a game by the sound of it. But in terms of what is happening with Wasps now, there's now been a sort of bounce back story where potentially there may be the opportunity, and I'm again reading from the Telegraph, it's understood that discussions are taking place at a senior level within Premiership Rugby and the Rugby Football Union about finding a process in which the club could be offered a franchise place to return to the second tier of English rugby within the next 5 years. So, I mean, at the moment, as it stands, Wasps is not really much more than a badge and a collection of remarkable sort of stories. They've got no ground, no players, they've got no coach. I think they've got some sort of training facility, but I'm not quite sure whether it's elite level or not. Can you shed any light on a potential revival for Wasps and Worcester in a sort of future conversation around the Premiership or certainly the Championship as it is?
I think you've really got to consider it. There's a load of hurdles that you need to jump through. But if you look at the current system, essentially, if you go through insolvency, don't pass the test, then you go down 10 leagues, right? So you're at least 10 years away from being a Premiership club again, or a professional club. And I think, that sort of crime and punishment sort of approach, I think is perhaps a bit harsh given the brands that exist there. And it certainly was a really disappointing outcome beyond the first disappointing outcome with Wasps and Worcester, that they weren't going to be a quickly resurgent brand within the Championship. And the Championship needs it, in my view. It needs those strong brands to help elevate it. So I think if that was a solution, and we haven't had formal discussions about this at all, you need to sort of plan it into the medium term, because you also got to think about the current Championship clubs and their right to be in that competition, and other teams below that, National 1, and their aspiration to be in the Championship. So you need to sort of balance fairness with trying to rekindle those brands. And
would you like to see them live on, though, and live on, I suppose, in the nearer future than a 10-year return to top flight from a personal point of view?
Personally, yes, because you've got one of rugby's greatest brands there in Wasps, and Worcester's got a huge following. Who, with a load of passionate supporters that have had a really tough time.
Okay, you can just get a sense of the scale of the conversations that are going. I imagine no 2 days are the same, are they? It's sort of one drama to the next. Obviously, we're going to come on to the Premiership final. What I do want to ask you about is there's been a lot of sort of, I suppose, a growing theme about the fact that the unfortunate scenarios regarding Wasps, Worcester, and potentially London Irish, stress potentially, could potentially be an opportunity to accelerate your plans around a relaunch and this sort of franchise opportunity. Can you give us any insight into where those conversations are?
Well, I think when you talk about a franchise opportunity, we did a bit of work just when I first started to establish what the right size, optimal size is of the Premiership, and actually the answer for various reasons is less is more, and a 10-team Premiership actually is a more sustainable number and creates a better narrative. And we can talk about the various different elements there. And so our clubs are aligned that from the 24-25 season onwards that would be the goal.
Yeah.
And so with that creates no international conflict, and so therefore you've got a better narrative with the international season. It allows clubs to have much greater access to their England players, which is clearly an issue at the moment, and that affects crowds and that affects competitiveness as well, and also a whole host of other commercial reasons. That's probably the optimal size. But then in how to get there, it wasn't envisaged that this would ever be the case, frankly, and that's the just to be absolutely clear, this isn't a sort of this was not envisaged. So I think the other thing you need to think about is the second tier with this, because I think if we were transitioning to a 10-team league, we wanted to have a healthy Championship there, and so I think there's still a lot of work that needs to happen there to bring them up to anywhere near the sort of level that you'd want them to be a competitive 2-tier system. But I think going forward from 24-25, the goal is 10.
Can I ask about star power? Do you measure I guess use the word recognisability. I'm not even sure if that is a word. But do you measure who in the league has cut through and the levels at which they do that? And where are those levels at the moment?
Yeah, they're not as competitive as they should be. We did a load of work last summer to understand where our players sit with other comparable sports, and so we've making a big effort around trying to elevate players. And I'm actually in the middle of a roadshow around the clubs at the moment where we're sitting down with a mixture of senior players and squad players around what the importance of players to our plan around growth, what we intend to do to support them. And so whether that's through training, social media training, but also some assets that we're putting together to help with social, literally just make it easier for them to promote themselves. But also we've had a big discussion with the DORs and the players around access and culture, because I think historically, we talk about tall poppy syndrome and various other things that have probably held things back. And I think we need to start opening that up. And I think the DORs have been really supportive of this. And I think, you've got a really good breed of DORs there at the moment who have this, mindset that how important they are, because they're part of the story, but also the players. So I think there's a real willingness now. And you need to build trust, you need to make it good quality, all that stuff. But I think we're going to see a change here.
Little Hard Knocks. Hard Knocks would be brilliant through pre-season.
As in documentary style thing.
Could you imagine if there was cameras there the first time that Guzzi or Sanderson or whoever brought the Wolves in?
Yeah.
So gave that speech.
Yeah, I mean so we've got some cameras in at the moment because there may or may not be something popping up soon. Another sports doco. But actually, it's really important because actually it's building that trust within those player squads to get used to that type of stuff. And there's a lot of teams that already do this.
Yeah.
But we're seeing some really good responses, and I mean the game's not short of characters, right? And so, whether you're attending a sort of post semi-final party for sale. Or even probably the party pre the semi-final at the Premiership Awards, or miking up the owners during the games as well. All that kind of stuff is really entertaining.
I love it if they all came in average Joe kit when they get off the bus. Sale. See that repost?
Yes,
it was brilliant.
Yeah. I don't think they were very happy, and then they were very happy.
Yeah,
is the inside story. So that is really interesting. I'm fascinated in whether the DORs have sort of said whether there's had to be a bit of work in trying to get them on side. I can't imagine Rob Baxter is a massive TikToker and Instagrammer, and I'm interested in how you've sold in the benefits of, we were saying on the show last week, if the players can't sell the game themselves, then nobody can type thing. They have to be front and centre of all of this. What is the sort of the messaging that you've given to people like Mark McCall and Rob Baxter in order to get them to say, do you know what, the time is now right to let these taller poppies grow type thing?
I think it's just the promoter mindset. I think we talked about it previously, where the best people to sell the game are the players and the coaches. And if you're just relentless about that and take any opportunity to talk up either what's happened or is about to happen, that's going to have a massively positive effect. And so everyone's got the opportunity to say something positive about themselves or their team or their league. And I think those opportunities need to be taken up and need to be grasped. And it's not asking players to do anything they're uncomfortable with. Everyone's very different characters. Everyone's a Joe Marler, right? It's just everyone's an ambassador, right, for their sport, for themselves, for the country, or for their club. And so it's just part of our job to do it. That's part of my job, part of your job. Everyone's job here is to help promote the sport. And I think we just need to be a bit more positive about it as well.
Of current players, does Marler get the greatest cut through? Who comes out on top?
So our TikTok went absolutely bonkers when Marcus Smith got videoed with his pants off.
Right.
So it depends. It depends what bit of clothing.
It's currently what the TV team are doing.
You ended up in the papers with your pants off the other day as well.
Yeah.
You and Hask. I mean, yes, whatever sells the game, I suppose, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which club leads the way in terms of, I was going to say, sort of testing the boundaries and the barriers and growing itself beyond a traditional rugby audience? Quins?
I think there are clubs that are good at certain things, and I think everyone's raising the bar. I'm really excited about what Sale have been doing recently. Like, they are so important for rugby and what they're doing, and especially up north. And I think they've approached it in their own unique way, and I've no doubt they'll make an impact this weekend and beyond.
They did do a very good. Did you see their Globo Gym post?
Yeah.
No.
They responded to Hask's rant with a sort of Globo Gym average Joe's.
Oh, no, I
mock-up.
saw the picture
Yeah.
with the faces
very
crudely
good.
painted on, yeah.
Can we talk about this season on the pitch? Because there have been we've again touched on it in January, there have been so many easy opportunities to take chunks out of the game in general, but as a product, this season has been, I think I saw a post on Prem Rugby just saying this league is bonkers, which sort of sums it up quite beautifully, really, doesn't it? Have you got any kind of detail as to the numbers, the stats, what this season has done on the field?
Yeah, I mean, so it's been the most competitive, entertaining, just by the narrowness of the margin of. So I think 43% of games have fallen within 7 points. Okay, it's also been the highest scoring season, and so I think the average is 7 tries per game. Okay, so you've got that stuff going on, and then probably the epitome of it was, or my favourite game was. The Quins Exeter game, I think it was like 43-42.
Yeah.
Like, and I rewatched that like it was a sort of DVD that you get from whatever, the World Cup or something like that. That was an amazing game. But it's just been from start to finish, whether it was Ellis's try in the first minute against Bath, and then to Ollie Lawrence's last-ditch try, which secured Bath a Champions Cup spot in the last game of the season. It's just been non-stop from that side of things. Again, a bit building up personalities and individuals in there. I think again it's massively helped.
Yeah.
You look at the try scoring battle between Murley and Carreras, and that's just it's just been great.
For all the challenges, rugby is on the pitch is in a very good place right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and obviously the media always think you have a go at them, but I think they've got a job to talk about the good sides a bit more. We always talk, it's always very negative.
Yeah.
We're negative as players. We've talked about it. What the difference? What league lads bring in their how enthusiastic they are and how good they are at talking people up and saying how great they are. And Hask's great about talking himself up. He always. And I think we need a bit more of that in the media. We need to sell it.
A bit more Eddie Hearn.
Yeah, we need to sell it. If you sell it as a negative way, I think that's what's missing. There needs to be a change in the positivity around. We talked about it last week. I talked with someone last week about it. How you need to pick up on all the good stories, all the life-changing stories that grassroots clubs do, and what actually the game is and what it teaches kids. Because they're all the positives of how to work hard, respecting your ref, respecting the people who run grassroots club, helping out, volunteering. There's so many good things that come from our sport, but we focus way too much on the bad.
Yeah, we need to change our body language. I think our shoulders are a bit dipped down at the moment for some obvious reasons. But I feel very optimistic around where the sport's heading. I think clearly we're going through a very disruptive patch at the moment, and it's had casualties and it's been tough. It's been really tough to manage. But you just look at the positive signs around it. Look how important, therefore, the sport is to people. They really, really do care. And if you look at the products on the pitch, it's been fantastic. It's got amazing communities around the country. And I think again, talking with the players, just that ability to change your body language and to be more positive about a sport that everyone loves.
I know it's not your jurisdiction, but can you give a bit of insight into what a bumper Rugby World Cup in France will do for Premiership? Obviously, the Premiership fans will need an England team to go well in order to have a true effect. But what impact will a mega World Cup, regardless of England's fortunes, have for the league?
Oh, I think the eyes of the world will be watching rugby. It's the third biggest sporting event, I think, in the world, and it's in our time zone. And the French are going to absolutely blow it out. I'm talking about the French again, but they are.
You smell delicious, Simon.
Yes,
if I can put it that way, yeah.
But they're going to blow it out of the park. I've no doubt, and that just elevates it. And I think there's been even our World Cup here back in 2015. We didn't perform very well in it, but again, it has a boost, and it did previously. So I've no doubt there. But actually, I'm really if you think about the role the Rugby World Cup has over the next few years, I think it's going to be super important. Look at going to Australia next. I think that's a rugby territory which needs a big shot in the arm, and the World Cup will be awesome for that, along with the Lions tour. And then, I've hoped that it maybe goes to the States after that, which we're all trying to chase as a new market. I think that's a big opportunity. But then even for the Women's World Cup in 2025, that will have a massive effect on rugby, certainly women's rugby, women's sport, but I think rugby in this country as well. It will be a massive feel-good factor.
Can we finish with a bit of a look ahead to the weekend? Sale, Saracens. I mean, you've a lot of love for the French. There's quite a lot of love for Sale at the moment as well. I mean, tell us first of all the occasion, the pomp, the ceremony. It is the showpiece of the season. What are the expectations on Saturday?
Well, it's another epic game. Like, if you look at the finals that we've had previously, and actually just coming off the back of this weekend with the European finals as well, I think you can see what happens in finals and how much it means to people. And so I'm really excited for that. The story speaks for itself. North v South. I guess master and apprentice, the Ford versus Farrell, you can script it. And so that in itself is a massive treat for rugby fans and rugby neutrals as well. You don't need to be a fan of either of those teams to enjoy what's about to go on. So it's a really important occasion, and we really want to finish on a high. What's been clearly a tough and challenging season, but hopefully a positive ending.
We've had some ridiculous finals recently as well. Actually, I was thinking of the Quins win over Exeter. And Freddie Burns last year.
Yeah.
Another chapter to be written.
See what journey the trophy goes on next this year.
Do you want to try and call it? Everyone would probably be backing Saracens given the way they've played for the majority of the season, but that's exactly as Sale would want it.
Yeah, look, I think Sale are exactly where they want to be. I think Alex Sanderson will have them in fine form going down there. They'll play on that, probably on the underdog card, but I do think they're up against it. I do think Sarries are such a well-oiled machine and just know exactly how they're going to play, and they got a bit of stick that they used to play boring, but they didn't. They've just worked on their brand so much that they still protect their own ends, but then they have a lot more fun when they're out down the other end of the pitch. I think Sale are on a similar journey, just they're a few years younger, and they need to They need to go and win a final, which could kick them on. But you've got to say that Sarri's a favourite now. But what we've learnt from this season is anyone can beat anyone.
Yeah.
Bath were miles down the bottom at one point, and then Gloucester would look like they were going to have top four rugby, and now Gloucester are down the bottom, and Bath have got into Europe. So, I think finals are. I'm going to say so many cliches. Finals,
It's that time of year, Tins. Draw them out, roll them away.
It is who rocks up on the day. But if you look at both teams, Sarries will rock up. But if Sale bring their best game, they can beat them on the day.
Here is to a mega final. Do you head for the beach on Sunday after the Premiership final? Pop into the Speedos, get out the Lilo, or have you got a whole list of things in the aftermath that need to be done?
Bit of both.
Right. So you'll be tapping away in your Speedos from the Lilo. There's a thought for the lucky viewers. Smelling of eau produce.
Swimming in eau de
Yeah. Is there a lot to be done? I mean, what is on the to-do list between now and...
A lot. And so the professional game agreement is a big piece. Media deals, really important. Doing all these governance changes I talked about. It's a very busy summer, but hopefully we get it all done before the World Cup.
How easy is that? Like media deals, TV deals? Is it just basics of eyeballs times by a number equals that's what you pay me, or can you just hold out and go, right, I'm not giving you, if you don't pay that one, you're not having it? Will someone then just go, okay, we won't show it, and you go, how's it work? How's it work? Could you sort of put draw a line in the sand and go, right, this is what for the good of the game, this is what that number needs to be. Come and do your thing.
I think we're really lucky that I guess the success of our league as far as viewership and the growth in that, and also the value it drives for the broadcasters that broadcast it, and we've actually got an excellent partner in BT Sport, who've just actually been taken on by Warner Brothers Discovery.
Soon to be TNT Sport.
So it's soon to be TNT Sport, not yet, but in a few weeks.
Just marking the card. Those who know.
And with that's really exciting, because I think BT Sport have probably been up in the air a bit as to their future, and then this partner's come in and has given them a big shot in the arm. You know, they're an entertainment business. They're everything from HBO and Succession to Harry Potter and everything else in between, and with a big sport function that spans from the Olympics, which is part of their setup. And so we're really excited by what they can bring, and it's all about growth for us. And so that takes investment, as you point out, and it takes marketing, and so a brand like TNT can do both.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon.
And don't forget to tune into our sister pod, The Good, The Scaz and The Rugby, sponsored by our friends at Vodafone. Elmer, Mo and Scaz do some great stuff over there, and they're planning to keep doing that till the end of the season and beyond. So please, tune in.
World Cup is fast approaching, and thanks to Infinity Travel, we will be there on the amazing epic cruise ship in the centre of Marseille. In a city where it is almost impossible to get a hotel room, we're going to be with you and 4,000 others. We went to see the ship last week.
It's a large
Quite
vessel.
a promo. It's a large vessel. You're absolutely right. We've got a whole load of restaurants. We've got a whole load of gyms. We've got a whole load of bars to get stuck into. Bowling, swimming pools. We've got the cigar bar marked down already, and a lot of hospitality and inverted commas to look forward to. We're going to be there for the opening weekend with a viewing party on deck. That's the opener between France and the All Blacks, as well as the quarterfinal weekend too, when we're off to Ibiza as part of that. And if that's not enough, Hask will be DJing as well. To secure your tickets to what will be a truly unique way to experience Rugby World Cup France 2023, head to infinitysportstravel.com/GBR. Our quite epic promo is landing in the not too distant future as well.
I've still got
Hold
scars.
on to your hats
I've still
for
got
that
scars.
one. Tins, tell us about the World Cup after party.
Of course, I will do
Please
that,
do.
Alexi. Yes, check out our World Cup after party, starting in Guildford on the 31st of October, and then 16 dates throughout November in London, Swansea, Cardiff, Edinburgh, Northampton, Reading, Oxford, Leicester, Birmingham, Southend, Exeter, Plymouth, Newcastle, Nottingham, Manchester, and finishing on, I believe it's the 8th of December in Bath. With tickets available at Ticketmaster, just search Good Bad Rugby and you can find them there.
My favourite section of the show, and it may well be me, myself,
I'm
and I on
going.
this, is Absolute Shirt
Bye.
Show. This week, we're doffing our caps to Barnes Rugby Club, a club that dates back to 1862. Apparently, their inaugural fixture was against Richmond, an epic 3-3 draw. I think I've got that on DVD somewhere, actually, in the back catalogue. However, the fully documented history dates back to the 1920s. Today, 4 men's teams, 2 women's, an under-22s team, Colts, and a thriving minis and juniors section as well. This season has been the most successful in their history. The men's first 15 has secured second place in National League 2 East. The women's first 15 has won promotion to the Championship, and the under-22s won the Surrey Cup this season. So well done to all involved. And to add to that, the minis section, which was formed 15 years ago with 5 dads and 25 kids, has blossomed in the ensuing years. There are now 700 minis trotting out on a weekly basis, juniors and colts, aged from 5 to 18 every weekend. And for all the tough stories around the game right now, we absolutely love hearing of clubs that are surviving, thriving and doing the right thing. So well done to all involved at Barnes. You are our absolute shirt show of the week.
We're all about positive stories now.
We are.
That's what we're going to change.
Good. You've done GSR, so that is it for this week's show. We've only got one more to come this season. Would you believe it has flown by? I think we'll have a bit of an awards do next week and a reflection on all things Prem Rugby. Anything exciting in the diary for this calendar week? Is that this coming weekend?
Monaco,
Of course it is. When are you going?
Friday morning.
Congratulations to Andy Kilmister, the winner of our City Index competition. We're giving him a shout out because he didn't believe Craig when he contacted him last week. Well done, Andy. The Good, the Bad and the Rugby is produced by Shara Kilgallen and Ollie Hunter and is a folding pocket production. Good luck, Saracens and Sale. See you for the debrief next week. Bye
Go
for now.
Average Joes.